Hello friends, now that we have had a look at the various problems facing the rural India, or the problems which the rural India has been facing, and which are creating obstacles to the endeavor to develop the rural parts of the country. Now let us discuss some policies and schemes for rural development. To ensure rural development, a dedicated ministry has been formed at the center, which is called the Ministry of Rural Development. It spearheads all the development programs targeted at developing the rural areas of the country. So, the very setting up of this ministry is showing the resolve of the governments of the day, is showing the resolves of our policymakers towards developing our rural areas. Second thing which we need to discuss here is the Panchayati Raj system which exists here in India, and which is nothing but local self-government in villages. See, it was understood that villages and these rural areas, they've got their own problems. Many a times, the policymakers sitting in the state government and the central government, when they try to solve these problems, they may not be successful. Why? Because they do not have the idea of the condition at the ground level. They are sitting there in their offices, their air-conditioned offices. They may not be having a good idea of what are the ground conditions. And so, it was thought that if somehow we empower the villages to solve their own problems, then maybe it might be a good idea and it may speed up the development of our rural areas. So, this was the thinking which led to the installation of the Panchayati Raj system here in India. And now you'd remember, and very recently we have had in Uttarakhand Panchayati Raj elections in 2019. So you know that this system basically is a three-tier system, which the three tiers are: the lowest tier is the Gram Panchayat, then we have the Block Panchayat, and then we have the Jilla Panchayat for the whole district. And now the various office holders of the three tiers in these Panchayati Raj institutions, they are basically elected directly by the people in the rural area, residing in the rural area. So for example, if you have to select the functionary for the Gram Panchayat, that is the Gram Pradhan, then he will be selected from among the residents of the rural area by a voting procedure in which all the adults in the particular rural area may participate. So these kind of institutions have basically been set up, and the main role which has been assigned to them is to solve their local problems and to assist the development of their areas. Basically, you would see that these kind of institutions, the Panchayati Raj institutions, they have also been devolved some functions, which means some functions which earlier used to be performed by the state governments and at times by the central government, they have now been devolved to the panchayats. Why? Because the panchayats, they have a better idea of the conditions which are there at the ground level, and that is why they probably are in a better position to perform these functions and to aid in the development of the village. So what are these functions? Devolution of functions. Under devolution of functions, you can see health and sanitation, public distribution system. So whether the public distribution system is working well or not in a particular Gram Panchayat, that has now been devolved to the Panchayat that has been now devolved to the Gram Panchayat. Earlier that was being taken care of by the state governments, but naturally state governments are too far from the actual centers to be able to effectively resolve these kind of issues and perform these kind of functions. Again, land improvement, which means basically checking soil erosion, creating check dams to store water and to help in increasing agricultural yield. Again, animal husbandry, rural housing, family welfare, and women and child development. So all these functions have been devolved to the panchayats, the gram, block and the jilla panchayats. Not only this, apart from devolving these functions, because just performing these functions is not going to be possible for them until unless they have sufficient funds. So we have a provision in India wherein state finance commissions are set up on a regular basis, on a periodic basis, and they recommend how much fund would be provided to these panchayats by the state government. So how much of the funds will have to be allocated to panchayats? This is decided by an independent body which is called the State Finance Commission. So every state has to set up these state finance commissions, and then these state finance commissions shall recommend the amount of funds that have to be provided by the state government to the panchayat institutions, Panchayati Raj institutions, so that they can carry out the functions which have been devolved to them effectively. So we can see that there is a provision of not only devolving functions but also providing funds so that these Panchayati Raj institutions can carry out the functions that have been devolved to them effectively. So this is one well thought out initiative which was implemented in India with the main objective of ensuring and assisting the pace of rural development, because it was understood that the policies which have to be made for rural development, they can be made far more effectively by people who are staying in the villages rather than by people who are sitting in the state capitals or in Delhi. Right? Now again, in India, agriculture and allied activities are earmarked as priority sector and they are provided priority sector lending support. Now what do we mean by allied activities? We have also discussed this earlier. Allied activities means those which ally with agriculture, which means for example horticulture, floriculture, growing of flowers, growing of fruits, growing of let's say growing of fruits we have discussed. Then we have got growing of producing honey. So all these activities, cattle rearing, all these activities are allied activities. And now these activities, agriculture and allied activities, they in India have been given the status of priority sector. Priority sectors basically are those sectors which the government considers to be their priority, and to help these priority sectors grow, the government mandates the bank to commit a particular proportion of their loan disbursements to these sectors. The other priority sectors also in India, the whole idea is that once we have earmarked these priority sectors, there would be a regulation which will say that out of the total loans disbursed by a particular bank in a particular financial year, this is the percentage which should certainly go to these priority sectors. Right? As of now, this particular percentage is 40, which means if in India a bank is, let's say I'm taking a very crude example, is a bank is disbursing a loan of rupees 100, total value of the loans disbursed by the bank in a particular financial year is rupees 100. Out of these rupees 100, rupees 40 should go to those sectors which have been earmarked as priority sector. And agriculture and allied activities, since they have been earmarked as priority sector, they can be assured of at least some amount of loan being disbursed to them by the banks. Why has this been done? So that the credit flow to agriculture and allied activities can increase. Most of the people who are engaged in these kind of activities are to be found in rural areas. So naturally, even the credit flow would increase. There would be investment in better inputs, better quality technology, better inputs, and naturally the productivity of these sectors would increase, and the earnings of the farmer engaged in these activities would also increase, and this would ultimately lead to development of the rural areas. So that is the main objective behind earmarking agriculture and allied activities as the priority sectors. You can search the internet to find out what are the other sectors in India which have been earmarked as priority sector, right? I'm not going to tell you this you can always go and check on your own, right? Again, to ensure financial inclusion of people who are living in the rural areas, because generally most of the rural areas are far away, they are not part of the banking network. The bank branches are either non-existent, or if at all they are existing there, if they at all there is a bank branch there, it is far away. So many of the villages still are not part of the banking network, and to bring these people into the banking network, bring the people in the rural area into the banking network, RRBs were set up. RRB actually is a regional rural bank. In Uttarakhand we have got Uttarakhand Grameen Bank. These banks were meant specifically to cater to the credit needs or to the banking needs of the rural population, because the mainstream PSU banks, they were simply not able to cater to the specialized requirements of these rural areas. So RRBs were set up so that they can specifically focus on catering to the rural areas. Again, we have NBFCs, non-banking financial companies. These are companies, these are financing institutions which provide credit to the people. So they are institutions which provide credit, and if you can allow NBFCs to be set up in rural areas, they can provide credit easily, which would be easily available and accessible to the local population. And that was the main idea behind setting up NBFCs and encouraging NBFCs to set up their branches in rural areas, so that the credit flow can be improved to the people in the rural areas. Again, only recently, in the last 4 or 5 years, government has focused on this GEM Trinity, which includes Jan Dhan, Aadhaar and mobile. So the government has come up with this idea that people should be, those who are not part of the banking network, those who do not have a banking account as of now, they should be allowed to open a zero balance account. Why is zero balance account required? See, basically when you open up an account in a bank, you need to keep a minimum balance, let's say rupees 500 or rupees 1000. That is just not possible for somebody who is very poor. He simply does not have this much money, so he is never going to be able to maintain this kind of minimum balance in a bank. So it was thought of that let us allow them to have a bank account without the mandatory requirement of having a minimal balance in that particular bank account. So zero balance account have been opened, which means even if the balance in these accounts is zero, even then the accounts would remain operational. They would not be closed down, or the account holder would not be asked to deposit the amount which is equal to the minimal balance account. So this was what the Jan Dhan scheme was all about. And then the other two members of this trinity are Aadhaar and mobile. Now why are they important? Aadhaar is a biometric identification. It is a tool for biometric identification, unique number that all the Indians have been provided. And then you can always use mobile for banking also. So the main idea behind Aadhaar and mobile is to make the banking more secure and to ensure that the subsidies which are meant for people, poor sections of the society staying and residing in the rural areas, the subsidy actually reaches the intended beneficiary and is not usurped by some intermediary. Earlier, when the subsidy used to be sent, it used to get usurped, it used to get leaked from the system, it used to get usurped by the intermediaries. But now that is not possible because of Aadhaar, and of course because of mobile banking and Jan Dhan also. The person who has opened up a Jan Dhan account, somebody from a poor section of the society staying in a rural area, he has opened up a Jan Dhan account, and he has also provided the Aadhaar details. Now the subsidy money would come directly to his Jan Dhan account straight away without any intermediary being involved, and then he can withdraw the money using his Aadhaar as a biometric identification. So he can use his thumbprint to withdraw money from the ATM. Right? So these initiatives were brought about to bring the people in our rural areas into the banking network. Now, why is this important? See, banking network is important because first, it will fulfill the credit needs of the people in the rural areas. We have seen how people in the rural areas, when they require credit, since they do not have access to banks, they simply have to go to local money lenders who may be charging them a very high rate of interest. So just to ensure that they are not exploited in this particular fashion, and just to ensure that they have sufficient amount of credit available so that they can invest that loan in improving their productivity, in buying good quality seeds or fertilizers for their cultivation, for their agricultural produce. So for that to happen, to ensure that this happen, their credit needs have to be fulfilled, and that is why they have to be brought into the banking network. Apart from that, if they are able to save something, if they have a bank available with them, or if they can have access to a non-banking or a rural bank, they can always park their excess money which they have with the bank branch, so that they can earn something on that money rather than that money remaining sitting idle in their homes. So that was the main idea why these kind of initiatives were planned. Again, there is a particular regulatory framework by the banking regulator RBI, according to which banks are obliged to set up branches in rural areas also. So for example, if a bank is planning to set up, let's say 100 branches, a particular percentage, a particular number has to be set up in the rural areas. Is that okay? So if a bank is planning to set up 100 new branches, according to the guidelines which are there, a particular number of these 100 branches, they have to be opened up in the rural areas. The rest can be opened up, the rest can be set up in the urban areas. That is fine. But certain minimum threshold, a certain minimum number has to be set up in rural areas also. So this was done so that the rural areas don't get left out of the banking network, right? Again, let us have a look at some of these schemes for rural development. We have got the Ministry of Rural Development and Panchayati Raj. We have just discussed it now a little while ago. So the various schemes that it has been spearheading and it is actually taking care of: the Mahatma Gandhi National Rural Employment Guarantee Scheme, Deen Dayal Antyodaya Yojana, PM Gramin Awas Yojana, PM Gram Sadak Yojana, National Social Assistance Program, which provides pensions to people in the old age, to the widows, etc. Shama Prasad Mukherjee Urban Mission. Urban Mission basically is about providing urban amenities in rural areas. Integrated Watershed Management Program, so that the availability of water can be improved, and the quality of soil that can also be improved. Ultimately, all these things will lead to an increase in crop productivity. So that is the basic idea behind this particular scheme. As far as the Deen Dayal Antyodaya Yojana, second scheme that we have discussed here, is concerned, it is about providing some kind of a support to the people in the rural areas so that they can set up their own self-help groups, and then they can indulge in some gainful activity. They can carry out some small business so that they can improve their earnings, they can increase their earnings. The other schemes are self-explanatory. As far as MGNREGS is concerned, it provides some kind of employment to rural households. Awas Yojana basically is about providing assistance so that the families living in rural areas, they can have their own house. Sadak Yojana is about providing road connectivity to the rural areas. So all these schemes have been formulated with specific purpose in their mind, with specific purpose and with a particular objective. We'll be discussing all these schemes in detail in the forthcoming video sessions. Again, we've got Ministry of Skill Development and Entrepreneurship, which has been spearheading the Deen Dayal Upadhyaya Gramin Kaushal Yojana, which is aimed at skill enhancement among rural youth, so that they can improve their chances of getting a good job, getting a high paying job. And that is the main idea behind this kind of a scheme, and this is being spearheaded by Ministry of Skill Development and Entrepreneurship. Other schemes include Ministry of Power's Deen Dayal Upadhyaya Gram Jyoti Yojana, which talks about rural electrification, electrifying the villages. Then we have got Ministry of Agriculture, which spearheads these four very important initiatives: the Pradhan Mantri Kisan Samman Nidhi, which we have discussed a little while ago, the e-NAM, National Agricultural Market, e-National Agriculture Market. Then we have the Kisan Call Center and the Soil Health Card Scheme, wherein the farmers can call up and get their queries answered regarding their crops. And Soil Health Cards basically is one initiative through which the farmers can understand what all nutrients are deficient in the soil, in the fields, and what all fertilizers do the fields require. So that initiative also we'll be discussing it up in little detail later on. So these are the initiatives of Ministry of Agriculture. We have also got this National Optical Fiber Network, which is trying to connect all the Gram Panchayats in the country, and this is being spearheaded by the Ministry of Communication. And then we have got the Ministry of Food, which is basically overseeing the food subsidy scheme that we have, through which subsidized ration is provided to our families in the rural areas. So these are the schemes that we have, and we'll be discussing all these schemes in a little detail. But the basic idea behind this particular session today was to make you understand in a nutshell what all initiatives are being planned, and what all initiatives have been planned in the past, and what all schemes have been planned and have now been implemented to kickstart, to speed up the pace of development of our rural areas.